Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mentor Minutes podcast. I'm Jared.
I'm Jay.
And this is episode 7, and we're still doing our top 10 best games list from the different decades. And this time we're doing...
the top 10 over 10.
Over 10 years old.
So this is 2001 to 2010.
Or something like that.
Something like that.
2001, 2010.
Yeah, that'll work.
So, before we get into it, is there anything you wanted to add about how you made your list this time around?
So this was definitely a lot easier as far as there were so many games that I actually had played during these 10 years. So it was kind of harder in that sense because narrowing it down to 10 was more difficult. But there was also, I realized, like so many of the top ranked games on BGG in these years I hadn't played.
Yeah.
So I think somebody who had more experience than me would probably have a completely different list.
I agree. Same with my picks.
Yeah, but I'm happy with my list because these are my personal picks. So.
Again, so the disclaimer on these, as always, is these are our personal list, opinions, games that we have played. So obviously there's going to be games on your list that are not on ours because most likely we just haven't played it.
Yeah.
But also, it's an opinion. These are our picks, our favorites. So if you want to let us know in the comments of the YouTube video, we'll take a look at your list and see how that compares. If you're listening on our podcast streaming, then head over to our YouTube channel. We are on the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel, and the podcast, if you're on the YouTube channel, is found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor,
all podcasty things.
All the kind of podcast stuff you can find. So check that out. So if you don't have time to watch the video, you can, put it on your playlist or whatever and listen in the car, and catch up that way.
Yes, definitely. And it's been a lot of fun. And, it's interesting with a podcast because you're focusing so much more on what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
So please forgive all the ums and the likes that I say. So, all right. So we want to start at 10?
Yeah, let's go with number 10.
Okay.
Number 10. So for my number 10 on this list, and I forgot to write down the year that these came out this time, but my pick is a game called Seven Wonders, which is a great little card game that can be played with quite a few people. I think it's up to 7, maybe more.
Yeah.
There's also a dual version of it, so you can play a 2-player. It's a great little kind of world. It's based on like the different artifacts and different like civilization wonders that you might find, and you can build up armies sort of sort of try to attack your neighbor. It's a very abstracted out type of thing. But you're collecting all these different cards to get all these different points, and it's very streamlined. It's very popular. I think it's a really great addition to gaming, and it's always been a classic.
Yeah, it's still in print. It's still one of the top family games that a lot of people pick. Sure.
Definitely a medium to lighter.
Yeah, and I guess if you add the expansions, it gets more complex or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I have played this. I do like this, and I love Antoine Bauza as a designer. It just didn't make my top, but I like the dual 2-player game a lot. Sure. Definitely a lot.
I think the duel is even more popular. But I went with the classic on this one. Yeah,
good pick.
Thanks.
All right, my number 10 is a card game called Biblios.
Ooh.
And this is Stephen Fenn game. It's most people would consider this maybe like a filler type game. But it's a really unique game. I've never played anything like it because you have cards and you have, like suits of cards. It's got maybe the most boring theme in board gaming. You're literally like librarians collecting books.
Pretty close.
It's super dry. But it's neat because it's sort of like if you played For Sale, it has like 2 distinct phases. One phase is you're sort of giving a card to the other players. You're putting one in an auction pile and you're keeping one for yourself. Mm-hmm. And you do that with the whole deck. And then the second phase is in the suits of cards. There's also like money, like gold cards that are also mixed in, and the gold cards are used for the second phase, so that when you go through the auction pile, you use the gold to bid on cards that you want to also add to your hand. And it has dice as well, and the dice are the same color as the suits of cards, and the pips showing on the dice are how much points you're going to win at the end of the game if you control a majority in that suit. But the neat thing about the game, and why I still love it, is there are cards in the deck that also let you manipulate the dice. So if you see that your opponent's going like really heavy on red, you can try to lower the dice pips to like a 2 or a 1, so that even if they beat you at the end of the game, they'll get less points and things like that. So
I like that.
Cool game. Dice that are never rolled. So that could be a top 10 maybe. Games that have dice that are never rolled.
Yeah.
But that's called Biblios, and that's my number 10.
Excellent pick. Number 9.
All right. So my number 9 is also a dice game, but this time you actually do roll the dice.
Oh, okay. So this isn't that list.
This is a different list. So number 9 is called Dice Town, and this came out in 2009. And the dice that you have, everybody has a cup of dice that you roll like secretly, and they all each of the dice has like cards, like poker hand. What am I trying to say? Like suits of cards, like aces,
hearts and diamonds,
kings,
spades
and heart,
clubs.
things like that. And so what you're trying to do as you roll these dice is you're trying to make, sets or like a full house or different things. And you've got multiple times you can roll, kind of Yahtzee style. And then based on the types of suits that you have, then there's this sort of board that represents like an old Western town. And each section of the board lets you get certain things. If you have, like, say, the highest pair, or you have a full house, you can get gold, or you can get land cards and different other things. So you're competing with everybody to do this. It's a really neat game that uses dice in an interesting way. Definitely family weight game, and just that whole pressure luck, rolling dice and then trying to beat the other players with this sort of poker Old West theme is a lot of fun. So that's my number 9, Dice Town.
That's the similar like dice placing mechanic kind of reminds me of how Pioneer Days works, or
yes.
Or what's the other one? Oh, Grand Austria Hotel.
Yes, which I haven't played yet.
Okay.
Yes.
That's also one that's very similar sounding.
I'm gonna like that then.
I think you will.
Cool.
So my number 9 is another classic game. This is a cooperative game. One of the earlier ones, maybe not the first, but maybe second, that came out. It's themed after King Arthur and his knights. And this game is great, not only because it's a co-op, but because there's a traitor, or the possibility of a traitor. And that's the best type of co-op, I think, is when you don't always know who's on your side and who's going to do it. So the game in question is Shadows over Camelot.
Yeah.
And this is a game where you have, like you said, cards in your hand that can be played out like poker hands at various locations. You have to move your person to your knight to the different areas that require certain card hands. So like there's a section where you have to get like a full house, like 3 of a kind and 2 of a kind. There's pairs, there's a run.
Sets,
So there's different areas of the board like that. So teaching is very easy. It's just, the poker hands that you're trying to collectively get these cards out there to conquer those areas. And you're basically trying to defend Camelot from evil forces and invading armies. There's also was it like the evil deck, or like
there's like the
shadow deck, right?
I forget the name, but you basically do a good thing and then you do an evil thing,
right?
So
you take your good turn, you draw and play your cards, and then you always have to take an evil or shadow card off the deck and resolve that. So those are what's really going to complicate how fast you can get this stuff done, and it's also going to limit the amount of turns in the game, because a lot of those cards might remove the countdown timer, which are these siege engines that are outside of the castle. So once those are out, then everybody loses, unless you're the traitor, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. And you're trying to get certain things done to be able to win before all this stuff time runs out. And there's health points. I mean, you're still a character and you still have abilities. So I think it's a really great medium weight introductory co-op with a traitor game. If you haven't played it, definitely pick it up. And its expansion, Merlin, Merlin something.
Yeah, that's a little harder to find too. I think
it is
Merlin's
harder.
Men or something like that. I can't remember.
The expansion is totally worth it if you can get a copy. But that's my pick. My number 9, Shadows over Camelot.
Yeah, love that game.
Number 8. So my number 8 pick from this decade is another medium weight game that you can play with new players or your family or really anybody. It's called Ticket to Ride Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many Ticket to Ride variants and expansions. But for me, Ticket to Ride Europe was one of my favorites that I've played, and it came out in this decade. But the biggest difference with Ticket to Ride and Europe is the addition of the stations, so you can start using other players' rails.
Mm-hmm.
And pathways to try to connect your routes. But basically the stations is the biggest addition, plus of course the Europe map, which I found to be much more intricate and tightly connected. So there's a lot more competition among, where everybody needs to go because those cities are so compact. Whereas the base game of Ticket to Ride is the US map, and it's so spread out because there are fewer big cities that they added onto the board. So the paths are just generally less, there's less overlap on what players are going to be able to do to take the path. So I think Europe is a really good version of this and very easy to teach. I've played this with, my 7-year-old and she loves it. It's basically you collect cards, and when you have enough of the right color train cards in your hand, you play them, and then you can play your train pieces over the path, and however many pieces are needed is how many cards you need to be able to do that. So you get points for making paths, but you also get points for completing tickets, which says, you should connect from here to here. And as long as you can trace a path, then you've completed it. So that's how this game plays. It's very easy to learn, and it's great. So if you're looking for a medium weight game, I would still recommend Ticket to Ride Europe.
Yeah, and a great gift. And I think they even sell this at like Target and Walmart too.
Oh yeah, you can find this nearly anywhere there's toys being sold.
Yeah,
almost.
It's a great game. Great pick.
Thanks.
Okay, so my number 8. So I love racing games.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm excited for this.
And I think this may have been one of my games on the underrated list. I couldn't quite remember. Okay. But the game is called Snow Tales. Mm-hmm. And it's a racing game, but you're actually sled racing with huskies.
Yeah.
So I think it was on that list.
It was.
And what I love about this game came out in 2008, and you have a hand of cards. And those cards each have, dogs on the cards. Huskies, yep. And they all have different numbers, like from, 1 to maybe 7 or 8 or something like that. But your sled in front of you has a dog on the left and a dog on the right. So depending on the cards you play, because you always play 3 cards, if there's a difference in the number of the dogs on the left and right, so let's say you play a 5 on the left and an 8 on the right, then you subtract the difference. So you have a 3 difference, and your sled will actually pull in that direction that many spaces. So that's how you turn. Mm-hmm. So it's a really cool mechanism for racing. The third card you play is actually the brake card, which is how fast or slow you kind of go in combination with the other cards. And certain parts of the board you have to be going a certain speed around turns not to crash and things like that. But it's a neat winter theme sort of snowy race game. It has a real original kind of mechanism to it, and you have to avoid trees and do all these kinds of things to not damage your sled. But still one of my favorite racing games that came out during that decade, and that's Snow Tales, my number 8.
That's a great pick. Number 7.
Okay, my number 7 is one of the games that is the first one that I introduced to brand new players who are not familiar with hobby games, and that is Dixit. Dixit won the Spiel des Jahres, which is the Game of the Year award in Germany. It came out in 2008. It's such a simple game to play, and it's so intuitive because the rule set is so easy. You basically have this large deck of cards, and they're like big, like tarot-sized cards that have this sort of surreal artwork on them. very like Alice in Wonderland looking type art.
Very interpretive.
Yeah, like almost like a dreamscape type art. And what you're doing is you're looking at everybody has a hand of cards. I think it's like 6 or 7 of these cards that you hold in your hand. When it's your turn, you can say whatever you want. So you could say, my summer vacation, or you could say, a movie title. It doesn't matter. You can say as many words as you want, as much as you want. And then you choose a card, and you secretly place it like face down in the board, or on the center of the table. Then everybody else looks at their hand of cards and they try to pick one of their, cards that would match whatever you just said as close as possible.
Based on the artwork.
Or what's going on, or the action.
Feel from it.
Yeah, or objects in the pictures, whatever. And then, so everybody places those face down, you mix them up, and then you turn them face up. And then you have to and then people are trying to guess which one, you put out there that matches your clue. Mm-hmm. You can be super obvious, but the problem is if everybody guesses your card, then you're not going to get any points. So the goal is you're trying to get some people to guess your card and other people not to guess your card, and that's how you get the most points.
It's tricky.
So it's tricky. It's really like creative. It's fun, and it's super simple. And Dixit is definitely one of my favorite games. That's my number 7.
Well, my number 7 is a card game, and this one is called Arkham Horror, the card game. This one is a really interesting and well done exploration type mystery game. Mm-hmm. Totally cooperative. You can play 1 to 4 players at a time. It's typically a 2-player game.
Yeah, we're really good with 2.
Yeah, unless you get a second copy to get another set of...
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So
let's just put it at 2-player, basically, because that's the best ideal scenario here. So you have your character, you have your deck of cards, and you're trying to, using your cards, move around to various locations, also represented by cards, to spend clues and actions to uncover the mysteries of the scenario. And it's all based on the Cthulhu-esque, that sort of Lovecraftian horror. So that's how you get Arkham Horror out of it. So if you're looking for something that's, I wouldn't call it a light game, but it's certainly not as heavy as, say, Mansions of Madness, even, because that's got so much to set up, and there's a lot more involved. Arkham Horror is a nice, quicker dive into that arena of theme and gameplay. And if that's your jam, they've got tons and tons of expansions. It just goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. If you really, really like Arkham Horror, you can just keep going and buying the next, progression of the story that goes on. Now, I haven't done all of them, but I will recommend Arkham Horror if you're looking for that experience, either on a budget or for a shorter time, frame, or just for a great 2-player experience of what you might get for some of those larger mystery or Lovecraftian adventures.
Yeah, I've played this a couple times. I really enjoyed it. I think it's definitely a solid pick.
Totally. Number 6. So my number 6 pick is probably going to be a favorite for a lot of people. It's called Puerto Rico. And this used to be the number 1 Board Game Geek rated game for many years.
Yeah.
When this came out, and for probably the next decade after. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't heard of it, it's a kind of a medium box game where you are trying to you take actions with these tiles, and then other players can then copy that action to a lesser degree. You're collecting these colonists onto your board. You're collecting other resources so that you can build out, what are they, buildings?
I think so.
Yeah, like that you can build up onto your player mat. And there's all kinds of combos that can be done throughout, how you build this thing up. Mm-hmm. And once someone's taken the action tile, then no one can take it until the round resets.
Right.
And so partly you think, okay, well, if I don't take the big action tile, that I want to do, then I'm not going to be able to do it this round because someone else is probably going to do that. So that introduced that sort of mechanism of we're all sharing an action pool, but only one of us chooses and gets the bigger impact. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, I think it pioneered that. And so many games after have copied and implemented
copied that
in various ways. I'm thinking King's Dilemma or something like that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. even Seven Wonders to some degree, I think, because of the whole, working with the player on your left and right type thing.
Yep. Even Rising Sun, which is also a much newer game from Come On, and that one also has a pool of actions that once someone chooses, it benefits them better, but everyone else still takes that action.
Yeah, I never connected that, but you're absolutely right.
So like you can see the impact years down the line from Puerto Rico. So it's still kind of an abstract-y type of thing. It's not very thematic as some other games. So it's a Euro. It's probably played in an hour and a half.
Still a favorite of a lot of people.
Super good game. If you haven't played it, definitely check it out. Puerto Rico.
Good pick. And I'm going to have to turn in my gamer card right now because
you've never played
I own Puerto Rico and I've never played it.
Oh my gosh.
I know. So I get once the pandemic's over, we'll have a big enough group to play it, I guess.
How many times has he given me his gamer card?
That's true.
Let me know in the comments.
A lot of times. All right. So my number 6 is a Days of Wonder game. And Days of Wonder, like Ticket to Ride, they're known for great games, great components, great art. And that game is called Colosseum. And Colosseum, you'd originally think that it's sort of a gladiator type game because it's based on the Roman Colosseums. But really what everybody's doing in the game is you're putting on these different shows. So it's kind of like you're doing talent shows for spectators. And it's interesting because it... on your turns, what you're doing is you're trying to get different things like actors, and they're all these little like square chits that you're taking that have different things on them, and you're trying to match patterns on your player board that will give you a certain amount of points if you put it on play that has like all those different pieces in it. So it has kind of a Catan-like way of there's a place where you can trade with other people. It even has roll and move, but the way that roll and move works is you're rolling 2 dice and you can like split the movements. So as you're going around the track, the emperors kind of can stop by and you can get more points if you attract them into your Colosseum.
Nice.
But it also has some cool spatial elements, like you can grow the size of your Colosseum to try to like get more people to visit, to get more points, and just a fun game. And has one mechanism that I rarely see in games, and that is that once you go up, like you'll earn a certain amount of points for each show you put on. But you'll never go down in points and you never add to the points. So your successive shows that you put on, you're trying to beat your last score. And then at the end of the game, whoever has the highest score wins.
Whoever put on that best show.
Whoever put on the best show. And so it's a cool game. They have I think a TMG reprint that's like really fantastic reprint.
Nice.
And that's my number 6, Colosseum.
Number 5.
Okay, so my number 5 is a classic game that I think a lot of hobby gamers have heard of and have played and have loved. It's often one of the first games that you may introduce people to a mechanic or mechanism called worker placement.
Okay.
And that's Stone Age.
Nice.
Stone Age is a game where, it's a simple concept. You have a certain amount of these sort of prehistoric, like Stone Age humans that you're putting on different parts of the board to
Caveman
even. Yeah, sure. Caveman.
Let's go with that.
Let's do that. I don't know the technical scientific part, but if there's something.
Neanderthal?
They could be that. Who knows? You tell us in the comments.
The Crudes.
The Crudes. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But like certain places on the board, you're going to get your typical things, like you're going to gather stone or gold or, wood, things like that. There's a set collection element, so you can get certain cards or tiles that come out. But the reason it has a kind of a neat spin on the game is you also have dice. And so when you dedicate your workers to a spot, that's how many dice you get to roll. So if you put 3 workers in the forest, you're going to roll 3 dice. And then you have to then roll at least like a 2 on the dice to get a wood. So there's always this bit of luck that happens when you go out, when you go hunting for food, because it has the whole feed your workers type thing in it. But it's a fun game, and it's easy because It lets people roll dice, which they're familiar with. It has some pretty, the board's beautiful. So it has some, really easy ways of, like, there's few spots that you can go that you block people out, so it's not too mean. And just a great way to introduce worker placement to, new gamers. So that's my number 5, Stone Age.
And that one also recently had a reprint that had a winter theme to it.
Yeah, it was like a dual-sided board.
Right. You can have the regular game on the one side and the winter theme on the other. I'm not sure if it changed too much of the rules.
I read that it was pretty much the same game, but I guess they didn't include some of like the expansion, the original expansion. So some people were a little, I guess, put off by that. But I think you can't go wrong.
So it sounds like if you haven't picked up the regular copy of Stone Age, maybe go with the new one.
This would be a good one to go with. Absolutely.
It's a good pick.
All right. That was my number 5.
My number 5 is a heavier Euro game that's probably one of the most popular Euro games at the time when it came out, and probably still really played by a lot of heavy Euro fans. And this is called Power Grid. Now this game is about basically putting together factories and connecting electricity to different parts of the map. And the base game, and of course there's expansions. The base game has kind of this USA map that you're trying to expand your network out. But the crux of the game flows from the auction mechanic of auctioning off the factories that you're going to get, because you can only have 3 production factory cards, and also the resources themselves are basically a supply and demand economic problem. So as people need coal, they buy up the coal and it gets more expensive. So then you're like, well, maybe I should just go for a different type of factory, and maybe I'll go for the nuclear, because that's no one's doing that yet. So then those become more affordable. And so, as you run your factory, then you use those coal, or you use the plutonium and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, there's a lot of thinking and math involved in this game. And I think that appeals to certain people. And some people have even described it to me as mathematics, the board game, because you're doing so much addition, subtraction, and these calculations to make sure that you're running the most efficient, electric company, basically, across the map. And it's very cool. I like the theme. The artwork, some people love it. Some people, prefer the newer edition, which has some more brighter colors to it. I believe they call that the deluxe version. I still like the classic. I've got the classic one up here. I don't know if you can see that in the frame, but it has so many different other expansions and other versions as well that you can use different maps and that kind of thing. It's a very prominent Euro game in that scope. So check out Power Grid.
So I got to hang my head in shame again on this one because I've not played it.
Here we go again.
Yeah. It's the math part intimidated me, I think. But I would like to play this game, and I have played other Freedom and Freeze games. Yes. So this is one I want to try.
It's solid. We'll have to try it at some point.
Yes, definitely.
Number 4. So for my number 4 pick of games that came out in this decade, I'm going to go with one that you may or may not have played, but it's on my shelf here. I don't know if it's in frame, but it's called The Pillars of the Earth. Now, this game also is about collecting resources to do various things. You've got your stone and wood and brick and wheat or something like that. It's kind of like Catan as far as that goes. They're very common resources, but it's a worker placement game where you take turns. Whoever is the first player draws out of the bag the different workers. If your color is chosen, you can then choose to pay the cost that it currently is in that turn order. Or just say no, I'll pass, and then it'll come back around you after everyone's had their opportunity. So whenever your piece comes out, you can pay that to immediately take the space on the board that you want, or wait and do it for free later, because gold, which your currency, is very tough to keep a high amount. But when you place your workers, you're only really reserving those spots, because everyone has to place their guys before the actions actually happen. So once all those are out, then the next phase is you go through the numbered turn actions. So you start with 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way around until everyone's done actions that are on those spaces. So all things happen in this order. And you can collect new builder cards, new construction guys. You can engage with the market, buying and selling resources if you feel like you have to. You have a limit of 5, crafters that you can have, and basically at the end of each of these rounds, and the game takes place over 6 rounds. You're building up a cathedral in the center of the board using actual wooden blocks to build the cathedral, which is also how you track the round. And you always have this opportunity to convert your resources you've collected to points by whatever ratio your collected craftsmen and builders have. Yeah. So you might have one that says, he can turn in 2 wood for a point, and he can do this twice. And so you do that, as much as you can, and then you hope to do it again next round or get a better card and maybe get a better conversion ratio. And so you're tracking your points on the outside of the board. It's a really cool game. It's based off of a book that I haven't read, but it's fantastic worker placement. Even if it sounds complicated, it's really not. It's just got a very unique mechanism of the bag building or bag drawing that other worker placements don't use. So in that way, it's a little unique. I love the artwork in this game, and I haven't mentioned it, but the art in this is amazing.
I think, and actually, I was just thinking of this. I think the board, the artist was Michael Menzel, and I think he's the same one that did Stone Age.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think it's the same guy. Yeah.
They're very, very similar in just the detail that you can see in this board. So if you're looking for a medium weight worker placement game that's got some unique stuff and is beautiful to look at, you got to pick up The Pillars of the Earth.
So you taught me this game.
I did,
and I really love this game. It's not going to be on my list, so spoiler.
Okay,
but only because I only played it that one time, and I didn't feel like I could put a game on my list I've only played once. I need to play it a couple times.
Didn't have enough to say about it.
Yeah, but this game was also out of print for a while because I know it was hard to get when I was looking, and the expansion's almost impossible to find. But
at this point, the expansion's not in print, so it's going to be super on expensive. eBay, at whatever price you can find.
Yeah, good pick. Yeah, good game. Mm-hmm. All right, so my number 4 is a game called Kingsburg. And this is a dice placement game where you're rolling your dice, and then you have I forget how many dice you have, 3 or 4, I think it's 3. You roll your dice, and then you're adding the numbers up, and then you can decide on the board. You have spaces that represent different people in a kingdom. So you have the king and the queen and the jesters and the knights and different nobility that go from 2 to 24 or something like that. And so you can either split your dice up and do sort of lower actions based on the number of pips that are shown on the dice and get more actions, or you can combine all your dice together and then put them higher up on the board, and then you can get really awesome actions like a bunch of gold or something like that. And what you're trying to do is you're playing through these different seasons during the game. And you're also then getting materials to build buildings that give you either higher attack strengths or more defense, because at the end of every season, there's going to be something that's attacking the kingdom. So it could be ogres or dwarves or monsters or whatever. And you have to have enough strength, army strength, to be able to beat them, fight them off, and then continue to earn your, the goals and things like that. It's been a while since I played that, so some of the details are a little more fuzzy, but that's because it's been packed away. But I have the new version of this game that came out with different art. And for a dice placement game, it's so much fun. And I really, really love it. That's my number 4, Kingsburg.
Nice. Number 3.
Okay, my number 3 is a press your luck game. And I love press your luck games. This one has an Indiana Jones theme where you're going into a dark cave and you're trying to find these gems before you encounter all these hazards. And the game is called Diamant, or in the US, it's called Ink and Gold.
Yeah.
I like Diamant because I think the components are just way better than Ink and Gold, but either one is the same game. And the neat thing about the game is everybody starts off at base camp, And then you have these cards that you lay out that represent like the path that you're following along this like mine or cave that has different gems. So you put a card out and let's say there's 14 gems. So you put the gems on the card and then you evenly distribute the gems by everybody who goes into that expedition with you. So, you could have up to, I think, 6 or 8 people in the game. So you split those gems, but then inevitably there's going to be some gems that are left over. And there are cards like snakes or like boulders or spiders that come out. And if any 2 of those same hazards come out during the expedition, everybody like loses every gem that they've collected so far, and the cave collapses and they have to go out. So after you lay a card out, everybody has a choice, and the choice is either run away or keep pressing your luck. Mm-hmm. And if you run away, then you get to also pick up every gem that's been left behind. But if more than one person runs away, you have to split that as well. Mm. So at the end, you do these 5 expeditions, and at the end, whoever has the most gems wins, basically. But this is one of those games that it's awesome because it's press your luck. It's just so much fun to see what everybody's going to do. And then when you have that moment where like you're the only one left in the cave, mm-hmm. and you press your luck, and then a card comes out and it has 17 gems and you get all of them. I mean, that's just such a cool feeling. So Diamant or Ink and Gold is my number 4.
That sounds awesome.
It's a great game.
It also thematically reminds me of how Clank works, right?
Very much like that.
You got to escape before you lose all your treasure and stuff.
Yeah, very much like that. But it's super simple to teach. So I brought this to Thanksgiving, and my family had a blast playing this one.
So my number 3 is a game that we've already discussed on today's lists. And it's another worker placement game, medium weight, by a really good artist called Stone Age.
All right, first crossover.
There's a crossover for you. That should speak for itself. I mean, it's number 3 on my list. It's a crossover from Jay. And apparently that never really happens. So
it rarely happens with us.
If you watched our previous episodes, there's very few crossovers, which is just amazing to me. But I had to put Stone Age on here. It's just fantastic. I mean, after all these years, the fact that people still, go and point to it as like one of the best introductory worker placement games to teach people like the mechanics. Obviously the artwork's amazing. The gameplay is very solid, but it's not complicated. Yeah. And there's that sort of push your luck in a sense where, you kind of have to strategize. How many guys do you think you might need to get enough die roll to get the resource that you're really trying to, get as much as possible? So Stone Age has a lot of different cool mechanisms that, he didn't also talk about, like building buildings, and there's like a tools aspect that you can convert dice and, adjust your rolls. Better.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like that. So it's not all random, when, you're trying to collect resources. So Stone Age is really high up there, and for this decade, it's my number 3.
Yeah, great game. And the first time, what really got me to want to buy this game was watching Tabletop and the Will Wheaton and them play through it. So I highly recommend that video after you've watched all of Meeple Mentors videos.
There you go.
I had to say that first.
Yeah, hashtag non-sponsored.
That's right.
Number 2. So my number 2 pick is a game that originally came out earlier than this, but this is the 2nd edition, and it made so many changes, I had to include it here. I was thinking of including it in earlier lists, but I wanted to include it here, and that's called Fury of Dracula.
Okay, yep.
2nd edition. At that point, once we've gotten to the 2nd edition, and that's the one I still have, it's very... it's a cooperative with Trader. Well, sort of. You've got everybody against Dracula, right? And Dracula is hidden movement. And so he's moving secretly by placing cards on the board. And everyone else is trying to find him and kill him. And you can do that by moving around, by doing different various actions. I did a tutorial for the 4th edition on the channel. So if you're interested to learn all the details of how this game works, click that. But the 2nd edition is when Fury of Dracula became sort of a modern classic, I think. I feel like not a lot of people really got into it until the 2nd edition hit. And then from there, everything we have, the 3rd and the 4th edition, were all kind of based on how it was streamlined and how the art and how everything was built around from this version.
Okay.
And so I don't remember the original year that Fury of Dracula came out, but it's such a very different experience than once you get to second edition. So that's why I included it on this list in this decade. If you're looking for a really cool vampire horror theme, one against many, hidden movement, all this kind of stuff, and building up your character, having special player abilities. I mean, this game has it all. Like, it's amazing. The artwork, it's really nice looking. And of course, each edition after second looks even better. Not to mention, I believe the fourth edition comes with pre-painted miniatures.
Yep, that's the version I have.
Absolutely. So that's probably the one you want to pick up. But it wouldn't be here if it weren't for the second edition, which came out. And that's why it's my number 2.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to have to watch your tutorial video in this because I've not played 4th edition yet, although I bought it.
Okay.
And same thing. I heard such great things about this game, so I'm really excited to play this one now.
So now, I mean, it does last a long time, right? Like, it could be
3 or 4
3
hours
to 4 hour game. But it's so fun. I mean, it's not a game that ever drags or lulls or anything.
Yeah, you just plan an evening around it, you know?
Yeah. You say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to prepare, and like, you're going to be
candles.
Dracula. Yeah. Like, don't lower the lights, get some mood music going on, and have a Fury of Dracula night. You won't be disappointed.
Awesome. Okay, so speaking of thematic games, my number 2 is a game from that Fantasy Flight put out, and it's not in print. I'm hoping that maybe it'll come back at some point. It's called The Adventurers, The Temple of Chalk, if I'm pronouncing that right. This game came out in 2009, and it's been described as Indiana Jones the board game, and I kind of love that theme.
Didn't you already say Ink and Gold was that?
Ink and Gold's similar too. Yeah, it has a lot of. I love like the adventure type style games that take place in like a Mayan temple or an Incan ruin site or something like that. But this game is it's very similar to a lot of the classic board games in that you have a figure. You're moving a certain amount of spaces along like kind of a guided track. But the fun part about it is as you have your adventures, you're kind of going through this temple and you're taking treasures. And again, this is, it's just a theme. You're robbing the temple of these treasures. So each section of the game, you're going through a different like booby trap. So you start and you're in the kind of the corridor where the walls start coming in on you, and you have to like get through that before you get squashed.
Like Star Wars, like garbage chute.
Yeah, like yes, that works too. And then there's another section where you're going across these tiles that have like lava, and if you step on the wrong tile, you're going to fall through and you're going to die. And,
like Temple of Doom.
And
we are going to die.
And speaking of...
I love that scene.
Speaking of Indiana Jones, the whole time you're playing this game, there is a boulder that is following you as you go through the thing and can kill you if it catches up to you.
Sentient boulders.
And
Just kidding.
almost, yeah.
I'm following you.
It's all based on dice rolls, so you never know what's going to happen or how far things are going to go. But it's got a really cool mechanism where, as you're picking up these treasures, the more you're carrying, the more load you have. And so you have less actions as a result. So it's like, you're picturing yourself like holding all these treasures in your hand and you're slow running out of the temple. So that means that the boulder can, yes, that's expansion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's called the Juan Valdez expansion.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we're going off the rails.
We're totally off the rails at this point. But there's those hazards. There's the boulder. There's like a rope bridge that you can destroy if you're trying to get across it, and all the while you're trying to go through, get as many treasures, and then get out before the boulder like seals you off and everybody dies.
Wow.
So it's a lot of fun. I have the Fantasy Flight version that came with like the little painted miniatures.
Nice.
So it's a great one to introduce to new people because it has very common mechanisms. But it has a lot of like just awesome theme, and it's just a lot of fun, just a fun family game. So that's my number 2, The Adventurers, The Temple of Chalk. And they also have one that's called The Mummy's Curse, which isn't quite as good, but it might be a little easier to find.
Well, what can you do?
If you like the theme, go for that.
All right, so before we go on to our number 1 picks, I thought it would be a good time to talk about some of our honorable mentions, because for this list, especially for this decade, there were just so many to choose from.
Tons.
I had to add some additional just to mention, so that you're aware of some of these really awesome games. Again, ones that I've played that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, same
and
here.
He had a list as well, so here we go. One of them, Betrayal at House on the Hill. Another cooperative game that becomes a cooperative with a traitor because there's so many scenarios that unlock depending on what happens in the game. And then that player then becomes the monster or the traitor or the what have you based on the scenario. It's been, reprinted. It's got a legacy version now, and it's very good, but it's also somewhat cliche now. Like, I feel like it's been around so long and so many people have already played through it. It's kind of like, I can't.
Been there, done that.
It's hard to recommend it playing it again at this point.
Yeah. I have a brand new Scooby-Doo version of this game.
Well, there you go. That's what you should do.
That's the one I'm really excited to play. But
the Scooby-Doo Betrayal.
Scooby-Doo, yeah. What else? Any other honorable mentions?
I had a couple. One's called Cash and Guns.
Oh yeah, the good game. Good game.
It's just a blast. I mean, if you have an objection to like pointing foam guns at your friends, then don't play this. But if that sounds like hilarity to you, it is.
Yes.
Because you get to try to like shoot somebody who you think is like the guy who's stealing everything, and you're like, all right.
Very cartoony, very
silly,
mild
over
theme.
the top.
Yeah.
Aside from the foam fake guns, I mean, you could play this with kids probably older than 8 or 9.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, definitely. It can be a family game.
Rivals for Catan.
Oh,
have you played this?
No, I've heard of this game.
So, Catan itself, all right, so much has been said about it. I'm not even going to try it. But Rivals for Catan is a 2-player game that uses square cards, and you build out your horizontal like city, and you have to be able to separate out your settlements and cities, and you can then also build out above and below at like diagonals, and so you kind of get this like long road pathway of stuff that you can do. But everybody starts with like 6 resource gathering cards that makes up their starting area, and you have your own thing and they have their own thing, and when the die is rolled, you always collect something. There's not a robber, and there's not any missing out, and there's no trading, and so it's a little bit more strategic, it's a little more competitive, and I find it a lot more fun than regular Catan.
I think I'd like this game. I don't like Catan, so
right. And I don't play Catan a lot because of all these other reasons that people have said. But this is a wholly different experience that I think Catan should have been in the first place. If they found a way to make this into a 3 or 4 player game, then this is even better. But for what it is, a 2-player card strategy version of Catan, Rivals for Catan. I wanted to mention that.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
And then the last one is a smaller, lightweight sort of party game that I've played at different restaurants, bars, whatever. You just bring a deck of cards. It's called Cockroach Poker.
Yeah, it's a good game.
It's so fun to be able to bluff what cards that you're giving somebody and have them either call you or not. And then when they get it wrong, you can laugh, and they have to put it in front of them.
Great game.
Essentially, you've got a deck of cards and you deal out, so everybody has all the cards are out. And there's all these different suits, which are types of creatures or insects and stuff.
Yep.
And when it's your turn and someone, you choose a card, you place it face down, and you say who you're giving it to. And if they believe you on what you say it is, then, they flip it over, and whoever's right, the other player has to keep the card.
Yeah.
And you don't want to have these face-up cards, because once you have
4 of the same
suit, you're out of the game, and then the game's over.
Yeah,
so,
and it's neat because there's nobody wins the game. There's just one loser.
Yeah,
which is so cool.
It's so cool. Best. That's the best type of game. Is really everybody wins, but one person.
It's great to play with your buddies.
It's my favorite.
Any others?
No, that was it.
So actually, those are great ones I'd seen too. One of them that I picked was Wits and Wagers, which I think is a great party game. If you have people that like trivia or that have played trivia, but they don't really, they're not great at trivia. Like, I'm not great at remembering a lot of facts and details. This is cool because the questions are the kind of questions that like nobody pretty much knows the answers to. But when you're betting on, what you do is you bet with these poker chips on who you think is closest to the answer or knows the right answer. So you might not know any of the answers, but if you bet well on the people you think might know it, then you're going to do well in the game. So it's a great game. There's a bunch of different versions of Wits and Wagers. Another one which I think, this would have made it. It's not my favorite game, which is why it didn't make my top 10, but Pandemic. I mean, sure. Pandemic came out this year, and that game is huge.
This decade.
This decade, sorry. Yeah, it came out in 2008, and still being sold in Targets and Walmarts, especially with everything going on in the world. It's been selling like hotcakes. There's legacy versions of it. Ticket to Ride, which was on your list, was my honorable mention as well. And then really two others. One is Jaipur, which is a great 2-player game where you're collecting resources and trying to get the most points. My wife and I love that game. And then my last one, which is a bit of a cheat, is Pitch Car. Pitch Car Mini actually came out this year in 2000, or this decade in 2003. Pitch Car came out a little bit sooner, but it's an awesome racing like dexterity game where you're flicking discs and trying to make it around the track 3 times, and you've got obstacles and things. So Pitch Car is still one that I play a lot.
Yeah, those are some great honorable mentions.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. All right, ready to do our number ones?
Yeah, let's go. Number 1. So my number 1, and this is also a game that I think it appeared on my underrated list, and also is one of my favorite games because it's got me into the board gaming hobby as far as like the modern scene of things. It's very thematic. Last Night on Earth. So this is a zombie game, and I know at this point zombies kind of played out trope in gaming. But when this came out, this was probably the best version of a zombie board game you can find. In my opinion, it still is. So if you're looking for a great thematic, scenario-based, very fun and hilarious kind of game, because one player is the zombies. They control all the zombies on the board. And the other players are the heroes, and they get to have their own special abilities, their own items and equipment that they can gather, and they're exploring the buildings, and the zombies are just trying to get in and attack. And the artwork is very like cheesy, like B-movie, like the way they shot, like old the real actors that they shot for these images and for all the art that makes it look like it was from like this really cheesy zombie movie. And all the scenarios that came, and that you can get expansions for are all based on stuff that you've seen in zombie movies. So you feel like you're in the zombie experience of, the movies you've seen. It's just very fun. It's so just replayable. The stack of items, just the amount of actions that are possible based on the cards. And you can play up to 6, which you would have 4 heroes and 2 zombie players. But personally, I would recommend 5 players so that you have only 1 zombie player and 4 heroes. Just because I think the zombie player has it just works better if they're just the only one making all the decisions. But you can do it with 2-player zombie control. So that's my number 1 pick for this decade. If you haven't played it, you really got to try it, especially if you want that B-movie zombie experience. Yeah,
I need to try this game. This is, was it Flying Frog or something that makes all those games that have that artwork, art style?
Absolutely.
This is one I definitely want to try out. Okay, so my number 1 is a crossover. Surprise, surprise. And it is a cooperative game with a trader. Shadows over Camelot.
There it is.
Shadows over Camelot. Man, I love this game. For all the reasons you said, it's got a hidden trader, or not. So sometimes you'll play a game and you suspect everybody, but one of them actually isn't a trader. Has so many ways for you to die in the game, so it is still a difficult game, I think, to play. But I love that King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table theme. When you're accomplishing those things, like you're fighting the Black Knight, or you're keeping the Saxons and the Picts out.
That sounds right.
That sounds right. Sure. You're accomplishing these goals, you're actually putting like these white swords on the round table, and you have to have more white swords than black swords. I've had so many good experiences with this game where it just came down to like the last minute. And the thing is, you can actually exert yourself and actually kill yourself in the game as a knight to do like one more action, and if that leads to you winning the game, you can still win the game even if all the knights are not still alive. So it has just this really, I mean, it fits with the theme. Yeah, it has the poker hands, but they're represented by strength. And this is also another Days of Wonder game. So the components are beautiful, the artwork's beautiful. Bruno Cathala is the one of the designers and one of my favorite designers as well. So for all the same reasons you said, Shadows over Camelot is great. And last thing I'll say about this is it kind of holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Because if you remember Sam Healy from the Dice Tower, before he left the Dice Tower, he actually taught me this game.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so I was at a small convention in Connecticut that the Dice Tower came to. And so he taught me this game for the first time. I immediately went out and bought it. And so I've got good memories of that as well. So it's got a little nostalgia attached to it. So, number 1, Shadows over Camelot.
Can't argue that. It's a great game.
It is good.
So that's our top 10 list for the decade of 2001 to 2010. Are we doing another top 10?
I think we're done with that because everything else is kind of like our hot top games of all time in a way.
Once you hit past 2010, we're kind of like, these are the best games of all time.
But we would love to have your ideas for top 10 lists.
Absolutely.
And especially like unique top 10 lists. So we've discussed some interesting ideas.
This has been a lot of fun doing these lists. So tell us what your top 10 list suggestions are, because, doing these lists has been a lot of fun for us. And, any kind of unique top 10s are also really fun to try to dig through and come up with lists. But this is a podcast, so tell us other topics that you want us to talk about, and we'd be happy to discuss them on camera and stream it for you guys. Do you have anything?
No, this has been great. Thanks. And again, if you get a chance, rate us, subscribe. We'd love to hear feedback and keep improving.
Absolutely. So stick around. If you're hearing us on the streaming platforms, make sure to head to YouTube through the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel and subscribe there. In addition to this podcast, you'll find Learn to Play tutorial videos for medium to heavyweight games like Fury of Dracula. And also we've done unboxings, we do lore videos, and occasionally some interviews with game designers.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you there as well. And if you're looking for us on streaming platforms because you want to listen to our beautiful voices in the car or what have you, then we're on a number of different platforms like Spotify, like
Apple Podcasts,
etc., etc.
All of the above.
So thanks for tuning in, and I've been Jared.
I've been Jay.
See you next time.
Catch you later. Bye.